Hi guys, we're back once again. We are making a video about the new Vanguard Overdressed format. So today we are going over the starter decks, discussing what we like, what we don't like, and what we would change about the decks. So without any further ado, let's get to the first starter deck. So the Dragon Empire. As far as the right chain goes, the right chain is pretty much perfect from what we have right now. I mean, for what the deck is trying to do, these cards do plenty. And Nirvana is a really good grade 3, I think, simply because it can get you your trick stars back, and you do need trick start for the overdress, so you can play Verena over them and overdress it. So over trigger, we would probably change the over trigger for the one for the Dragon Empire, because if you trigger it on the attack, it restands your Vanguard. So you can use Verena's second skill again, which is on attack and not once per turn. So you can pump up your Verenas on even higher numbers. Also, I don't know, what do you think about the trigger lineup?
Me personally, I would definitely change the front triggers to crits, and maybe the draw. I would at least cut one draw trigger. I think 3 draw triggers is good enough, but raising additional crits simply because that Dragon Empire does more power when it comes
I
to
mean,
damage.
also, like, front triggers are not really that powerful, and
Oh no! Like the fact that they still give you 10,000 power. Don't get me wrong, but I would still prefer critical triggers in
yeah, but
Dragon
the
Empire.
problem of a Dragon Empire is not that it wouldn't have enough power. The problem is that this certain deck does not have enough attacks like most of
Yeah,
the other clans do.
it doesn't have enough pressure on the board that itself.
Yeah,
I do agree.
I mean, but the numbers are big enough. The problem here is that nobody cares if you have a 60 or 70k attack if it only does 1 damage. Nobody's gonna guard that. So even though Verenas can get pretty big, if you don't get a second crit on them or anything, nobody's really going to bother guarding them.
Fair
So
enough.
the
Fair
front
enough.
triggers are not really the best choice for this deck.
Definitely gonna change those out.
Okay, so the PGs, yeah, we're definitely changing the PGs with
Oh
the
yeah,
one from the first set. Like, the huge problem of an overdress format is that you
hand
don't have
consistency.
enough hand. Yeah, exactly. Like, you don't have enough hand, and even if you have a hand, you don't have enough shield in your hand to actually guard all of those big attacks.
Most of the
So
time.
the PGs from the first set have the effect that you only have to discard if you have 2 or more cards in your hand. So when you're getting low on hand and you're barely hanging on, they're actually free. So you can PG the last 2 attacks for free if the last 2 cards in your hand are PGs.
Yep.
And this can be huge.
Oh
That's
yeah,
exactly
it can
why
definitely.
we're talking about the draw triggers, because the draw triggers are really essential for drawing your pieces, because if you brick here, you're really screwed up. But then again, they only have 5k shield, which is an additional problem, because you would much rather have a 15k shield trigger than a 5k one. But then again, you do need pieces, so this is kind of the hard one about the draw trigger.
I would still play 3 draw triggers personally.
I mean, yeah, we've seen what happens when you break in this format, so
Yeah, I would still play a certain amount of draw triggers simply because of the draw power itself. But I
yeah.
would definitely love to play like 8 criticals in a Dragon Empire themed deck, simply so you can actually put on additional. additional pressure on your opponent, since the other decks are slightly better when it comes to pressure.
Yeah, I agree. Also, the main great one from the right chain, like we keep the one in the right chain, but the other three, I also think that we keep them because even if you can't use the first effect, the second effect gets plus 2k, so it turns her into a 10k, which means it can rush on the first turn as an 8k, it can rush on the second turn when your opponent is on a grade 2.
It's an overall
and,
great
and
card.
even early, late game, like if it boosts a 13k unit, it still hits magic numbers because of a 10k boost.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I'd probably keep that. Then vanillas, well, you just change the vanillas. You never keep the vanillas, except if you're playing Cyclone in premium, I guess.
Fair enough.
The grade 2 from the right chain, like I would only keep one copy in the right deck, but the other 3 I would throw out because it's the same effect as the grade 1, so it gets plus 2k, but this is a 10k unit and it gets plus 2k, which makes her 12, and all of the grade 3s are 13k, so the numbers it makes are just terrible. Like, I
It's
would
not.
definitely
It's
throw
not.
this one
It's
out.
not worth it. It's not worth it to use as a rear guard.
Exactly. Then order. Yeah, I mean, this order on free, like, if you don't get a Verena,
It's useless.
it's useless, exactly. And the huge problem we had here is not that this card can get you a Verena from your graveyard or your drop zone, but the problem is that if you don't see a Verena early enough, you won't have a Verena in your drop zone to be searched from that, so it's pretty much a dead card at that point. But I mean, it's still very useful, especially if we will be playing a new Verena on a grade 3 that's coming out in the first booster set. So if we have 8 targets, it should get better with that.
Oh yeah, it's going to be way more of a power buff for Dragon Empire itself.
I mean, the deck is going to be way more consistent if we have 8 Verenas in the deck. The only thing I'm not sure about is whether the new Verena is going to be searchable with this cards. I mean, the main right chain and this card, because they all say Verena, not a card with Verena in its card name. Which is what the cards would usually say when you have multiple cards with the different names but the same keyword in the name. And yeah, of course, the grade 3, we're replacing that with the new Verena.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because the current grade 3 is just bad overall. It only gains 2,000 additional power, and it still gets power, don't get me wrong. It's a 15k beat stack, but we will get way better cards in the first booster than this.
Yeah, I mean, if you only have this 8k vanilla behind it, it gets on 23, which makes it a magic number, but then again, like, you don't even want this 8k vanilla, so you want something better on both spots, so I don't think you should keep one or the other. Like, just throw them both out, especially since you will need the grade 3 slots for the new Verena.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, so we are on a second deck from the Overdressed series. So, the Dark States. As far as the right chain goes, this is pretty awesome. I mean, there would be a bit of a change if I think about it. Like, the Violence Bruise has one problem, and it's that it does absolutely nothing on turn 3. So if we do get something better, maybe we would play another grade 3 instead of Violence Bruise, and of course that would have to be a grade 3 that also enables Final Rush. So the only thing we would actually lose if we go from that unit to the Violence Bruce would be the 10k from the Persona Ride, because we wouldn't Persona Ride. So we would have another grade 3 that would actually do something on the turn 3, and then we would go into Violence Bruce once we're already on Final Rush and restand with it. So that's my opinion on the right chain. Do you have anything to add?
Well, personally, as far as we had seen with the many times we have played together, well, the right chain is pretty good so far, and yeah, I do agree. Bruce is kind of bad if you start on your first turn. Like for this deck specifically, you want to go first, and your opponent goes second because you have a Persona ride available. And this Bruce specifically, he's good after the Persona ride. But that's only my opinion.
I mean, it's not the Persona ride that makes Bruce good. It's the fact that it enables the final turn to happen at the start of the ride phase, which means that you have to sit on Violence Bruce for the whole turn, doing absolutely nothing before it enables the Final Rush. And
Yeah.
its effect only activates on the Final Rush. That's why I said that I would have another grade 3 that would activate Final Rush and do something on turn 3, and then use Violence Bruce when the Final Rush is already active. So you can use second effect as soon as you play it.
Yeah, so what we're personally hoping for is mainly just make it faster. Like, we need Final Rush to be slightly faster if we want it more efficiently.
Yeah, but then again, the Final Rush is so strong that this is still probably the best starter deck in the Overdressed format.
Yeah, definitely. Simply because of the amount of power it can dish out.
I mean, yeah, it's a bit slow, I guess, but then again, you can still push with the grade 1s and the grade 2s, but every single card in the deck gets a lot better once you're in Final Rush, and once you get to the Final Rush, it just pushes so much that it's really hard for your opponent to guard, especially with the low shield values like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the Overtrigger. We're
Yes.
definitely replacing the Overtrigger. Because, well, we only had the Overtriggers for Dark States and the Dragon Empire revealed by now, but
Mm-hmm.
the Overtrigger for the Dark States gives you plus 10 canopy power on your turn and critical +1 for the rest of the game, which means that even if you lose all of the power by triggering it early game, you will still have another 10k and a critical on your Vanguard for the whole game. So you trigger that on turn 1, your Vanguard gets plus 10k and plus 1 critical, which means you're attacking for 2 criticals on turn 1, for 2 criticals on turn 2, for 2 criticals on turn 3. So even if you don't get 100 million power, you're still pushing plenty with that. Okay, so the rest of the trigger lineup. I think that 4 crits, 4 hills, 4 draws, I mean, that feels pretty good, honestly. I mean, the draw in this deck is especially important because you will survive somehow. Like, you probably do more of pushing than your opponent anyway, so I think that draw trigger is very important in this deck because seeing your pieces is much more important than having a lot of cards in your hand. I mean, a lot of shield in your hand.
Well, yeah, this deck is more focused on fast plays and more aggressive play style.
Yes, exactly, and this is why you need to see your pieces, because you don't have time to wait on them.
Exactly. I personally do agree with you on the part. This deck kind of relies on draw triggers to some extent, but
Yeah.
it is good to use them. But the
As
front,
far as the front trigger goes, I would still throw the front trigger out, honestly. Like,
oh,
y it gets quite a lot of power, so if you trigger it on a Violence Bruise, like,
mm,
you attack with both of your rear guards before the restand, and then if you trigger them on Violence Bruise, you restand your two rear guards and they both get plus 10k power from the front trigger, sure. But the thing is, don't you
does
think you would much rather have a crit on them, because the powers are already plenty for the shield values we have currently in Overdress?
mm,
So they're already hard to guard. Like, look at the secondary grade 3. Like, it gets plus 15k, which means it's 38,000 attack on its own, even if you don't boost it, even if you don't reveal any triggers, even if you're not Persona riding. It's already, what, 28k attack. If you're on Persona ride, it's 38k. And you make 2 attack with every one of them, so if you have 2, this is essentially 4 38k attacks with your rear guard without even boosting any of them. I don't really think that you need a front trigger, and I think you would much rather have an additional critical on that unit.
oh yeah, definitely. I see where you're coming with this, and I do agree with you. Since front triggers, don't get me wrong, front triggers are important, but they don't have that big of an impact.
Okay, so the PG, yeah, we just replaced the PGs with the new one. Like, that's going for every deck that we will reveal right now. So the secondary, I mean, the main great one from the right deck, the additional 3 copies.
Yes.
So, honestly, like, you don't soul charge if it's not on the Vanguard circle, but you do still get plus 5k power on Final Rush. And the same goes for the second, for the Great 2. They both get plus 5k on the Final Rush turn.
Which is
And, I mean, this one becomes 15k on the Final Rush, and this one becomes 13k, so
28,000.
I mean, if you're on 13k and if you're totally out of cards, the grade 1 is already enough to hit a 13k grade 3.
Yeah,
if your
but
opponent, I mean, if you use it on the first attack, you can already hit the 13k Vanguard your opponent has.
oh yeah, definitely. And the fact that the Dark Nation itself on Final Rush, it's pretty good.
I mean, I would probably keep both of them in the deck. Then
I would too, yes.
okay, then we have what exactly is this card called? A juggler, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we forgot to translate this one. Okay, so what this one does is, if your Vanguard is Violence Bruise, you soul charge 1 when he attacks or boosts. So it's a soul charge 1 on a turn 3, if you are in Violence Bruise, of course. And then on turn 4, when you're in Final Rush and onwards, it soul charges 1 more. So it essentially soul charges 2 on a Final Rush and 1 if you're only on Violence Bruise but not on Final Rush yet.
Which is still pretty good if your deck is, Soul Blast heavy.
I mean, we really do need the soul for the Violence Bruise, and like having a soul over 10 on the turn 4 is very huge, because you're going to use 5 soul for the Violence Bruise to restand for the first time, and then having another 5 soul prepared for the next turn can be really huge. I mean, we've seen the games last long enough to make free restands. Okay, so we have an order then, I think, before we move to the grade 2s.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
order, on play, Soul Charge 2. I mean, same reason. It's a bit low since you do have units that Soul Charge 2 in
It's still
other
a-
formats, and this
it's
one is an order that goes to the graveyard after Soul Charges, so it feels a bit odd, but then again you do need a lot of souls, so
it's a setup card for later on effects.
exactly, like, you do need it. It would be better if we would have a unit like other formats do, but since we don't, we use that. We use what we have.
Oh yeah, definitely. It does. The card itself does come in handy. Later on in late game, if you don't have enough soul power, the deck can be in a big disadvantage. But with this card, I think it balances itself out.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have vanilla grade 2s, like, you throw that out as soon as possible.
Oh yeah, definitely. At the moment you have the option to upgrade the deck with grade twos, just first thing that goes out are the vanillas, simply because they don't do a lot, and
I
you
mean,
won't
we
use.
already have a new grade 2 triple R revealed, and it's really awesome, so you have free grade 2s that go out right here, and now I guess you could throw out an additional Brody. But then
Yeah,
again, you do want to keep at least some Brodies, if you ask me, because
I would keep two, honestly.
I mean, Counterblast 1 is honestly very expensive, but then again, the rest of the deck is not Counterblast expensive at all. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
nothing besides this grade 3 and Brody even Counterblasts. So you
I
don't really need Counterblast, and extra 5k shield in this format, I mean, it's not that big, but
It does have a big impact.
yeah, it can come very handy, like, it saves your ass sometimes.
Oh yeah, definitely. I would still play him at two simply because, as you said, the newer grade two will be much better. So personally, I would be able to then play four of those.
Yeah. Or
But
then again, maybe we should cut out one of the Colossus.
well, yeah, but that's a more game design when the cards actually are revealed and will be able to be
Yeah, I
out.
mean, the thing is that the grade 2 triple R that was revealed is a kind of finisher, the same as Colossus, so it would be better, I think, to use Colossus instead of Brody, because the card design is very different. I mean, Brody is meant as a shield, meanwhile Colossus is meant to push, and the other grade 2 is also meant to push, so
Yeah, it's a grade three. It's supposed to be a beat stick.
yeah. Okay, so that's it for this deck. So with that, we're going to finish this video because it's already long enough, and we will film the next 3 starter decks on Tuesday after the over triggers for those 3 starter decks are revealed. So the next video is going to be released on Wednesday, so look out for that. Like the video if you like the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and we will see you all soon. Bye.